Hello everyone, welcome to another Flesh and Blood video. Recently, we saw the reveal of the final Guardian in Heavy Hitters, which is Victor. He seems really cool, but of course, he came out after the video I uploaded last week, so we didn't get to talk about him in it. Although, that did make me realize that we have a lot more time to really start diving into Heavy Hitters than I thought. A few weeks even, which is why now, similar to the Reinar video I did, we're going to be taking a look at some of the other classes prior to Heavy Hitters. We saw Reinar not last week, but the last one of these. And since we just saw Victor, I thought we would do Bravo today, and next week we might take a look at Dorinthia. It depends on how much of the spoilers we get next week, but I don't think we'll have the whole set by then. So we'll probably end up doing Dorinthia then. Bravo is a hero I've played against a lot. I've played it a little bit, but this takes a version of some of the more popular Bravo lists currently, with some of the developments they've made, and I think it's a decent list to start playing prior to Heavy Hitters for anyone who still wants to play Bravo, since I think the two Heavy Hitters characters will play a bit differently than Bravo. So if you want to play Bravo and start practicing before Heavy Hitters and then add in some of the new cards, I think this is a good baseline list. Starting off with the hero, of course, Bravo, Showstopper. He has 4 intellect, 40 health, the ability to give all of your attacks with 3 power or greater dominate this turn. Or 3 cost or greater, not 3 power or greater, 3 cost or greater dominate this turn. So no CNC, dominate. And that ability costs 2 and has go again. Our main weapon is a Nothos. It's Bravo's main weapon, just 3 for 4. If we have 2 cards of cost 3 or greater in our pitch, it gets +2. Pretty common that will happen off of a go again attack that Bravos are starting to play a lot more of, but since we are not on tech plating on this list, the 2-card hand potential with it is a little weaker. For our main helmet, we have Crown of Providence. This is the main helmet that you'll see most Bravos play, just because it's the biggest fridge. Similar reason with Crater Fist alongside the newer Civic Steps. The final main piece of equipment we need to look at is Feindel's Spring Tunic. We are not playing a copy of Tectonic Plating in this list because currently Tectonic Plating just does not compete with the versatility of Tunic. Right now, Tunic can be used a lot for getting off a little more efficient with things like Zealous Belting or Pummel that Tech Plating just doesn't allow you the ability to do. Tech Plating does require you to set up a little more for it, and even though Tech Plating does give you a little bit bigger of a fridge and give you the utility with a Nothos, Tunic just ends up pulling out a little more. You can see something similar if you watch the more recent event with Michael Hamilton on Bravo. He also elects to only play Tunic in his most recent list instead of having tech plating in as well. Although tech plating in the past has been an option to where you play that only and no Tunic, but I think right now at this current point it's definitely a Tunic meta for Bravo. The final equipment in this deck, we scroll down here, we have 2 pieces of Arcane Barrier. Null Rune Boots, because Guardian Shoes are pretty bad. Even Civic Steps, Quicken Token, can put you in a bad spot. And I elect to play a Null Rune Hood as well. Personally, I respect Wizards a little more than some others, and where Wizards still isn't the highest point in the meta, and we are even playing something like Oasis Respite in our sideboard for that matchup as well. I think 2AB is a good number for most decks, so I do like the Norrøn Hood as well. And then whenever we switch to a more fatigue-based plan, because of course we're Bravo, we do that, we have the Titan's Fist, so we can play a shield, and I have a Bastion of Duty. You don't need it. You could play Steelbraid Buckler instead, because they're literally the same shield, except this one has Protect, which you will never use in CC. But they're the same thing. Play this or play Steelbraid Buckler. Moving up to the main board, we of course have a mix of our good red attacks and our yellow Starstruck, and a lot of our blues. Starting with the red attacks, I choose 2 Chokeslam and 2 Debilitate. Some lists cap these out at 3, and I've also seen some lists play red Buckling Blow, but since this deck does not choose to play Buckle, red Buckling Blow is a little worse. And I only like 2 of the red Debilitate and Chokeslam just because I wanted that extra slot for the 1 more AB, although there are some other changes in the list from some of the more popular ones, as well as having these is great, but I feel like in most situations I'd rather play a bigger red attack or have another go wide turn with some of the stuff in our sideboard here like Belting or E-Strike. So I find that having 3 isn't always necessary, although having 3 of them isn't a bad choice and definitely could be made. 3 Command and Conquer because it is just a really good card. 3 Crippling Crush because it's one of Bravo's best cards. It's a spec. If you're playing Bravo, you're probably playing it. 3 Fates and 3 Sinks because we are Guardian. 3 Spinal Crush for those aggro matchups because this can be very debilitating. 3 Starstruck because it just is an insane card similar to Crippling Crush. 2 Boulder Drop. If this card was in red, I'm sure it would be in the deck, to be completely honest, but this card only comes in blue and it is not the best thing, so we're only playing 2 of it. It's great when you pummel it, but other than that, it's just a blue block 3. Moving on to, I forgot about these. Chokeslams, Debilitates, 3 blue each. Chokeslam and Debilitate are the better of the attacks, considering we're playing the red, so the blue ones at 3 definitely makes sense since we're Guardian. 3 Buckling Blow, because I think you still need it. The utility is nice, they have to block it. 3 Cranial Crush, because why not? It's a good card, it helps in some matchups. 3 Blue Disable, because this can be another effect that can interact with Arsenal. This one is one that's good with Tunic up, because if you have 2 blues and Tunic, you can dominate this one. 3 Imposing Visage, which is really in the deck just to find Showtime, but Imposing Visage is better than just playing Showtime because it itself has Go Again. 3 Macho Grande, because it's just a good attack, 7 for 8 Dominate. 3 Rouse the Ancients. This is in here primarily because it is a Go Again effect. It's an incredibly strong one. If you have a 4-card hand, you can play this pitching a blue and then reveal 2 attacks. Have this come in for 7. Then even come in with your Hammer after, and then Arsenal that last card, allowing you to have a great setup, pressure your opponent a ton. The obvious problem is that this card only has 2 block, which does hurt, but there aren't too many situations currently I feel where that super matters. There aren't a ton of hit effects, but there are still some. 1 Showtime, just to grab off the Imposing Visage. This isn't a card you really want to see in your hands. It's better in your deck to grab later. But it can also set up Crippling Crushes, Starstrucks, stuff like that. Terra Sunder, because it's kind of like turning your hammer into a Crippling Crush. 3 Thunderquake, because it's just a good blue. This one is actually pretty good with Crown of Providence. You can heave it and then block with Crown to still keep a 5-card hand and then have a really big turn after if you want to try to set that up if you're, say, pitch stacking and you have your Crown that late. 2 Unmovable, since I think Unmovable is a pretty needed card in some matchups, and we don't need 3 because of the Oases in our sideboard, but I'll talk about them when we get to them. And 3 Warmongers just because it's another blue block 3. It's good. Even though I have the main deck as 60 in this list, it is very uncommon for Bravo to play exactly 60 cards. From the nature of the deck, playing more cards is better because you can always have that game plan of playing for the late game. So a lot of these sideboard cards will just get added in and nothing really will get cut. Obviously, if you're playing against Kano, you'll go down the Fates and the Sinks, but I mean, I think that's really the only card you ever take out. Maybe Warmongers sometimes. Enlightened Strike and Zealous Belting are the main go again options. These come in when we want to get a little more aggressive. These give us great turns of going go again attack into our hammer. Even though Zealous Belting is better than Enlightened Strike in doing that, because the hammer can come in for 6, and also Enlightened Strike can't be pummeled. Enlightened Strike does give us the extra utility of being able to come in for 7, or try to give us an arsenal if we think we need it. Of course, I talked about Pummel. I'm only on 2 because this is another 2-block card that can be pretty dead sometimes. It's better with the Tunic, and this brings us to a total of 8 2-block cards, because the Zealous Beltings are 2-block as well. And I didn't want to include a 9th because I think that can, in a few situations, make you take more damage than you need to. And generally, I think if you found 2 pummels and played 2 pummels, you're probably in a spot that you're already winning. I don't think you really need the 3rd. Next is the Oasis Respite that I already talked about. Oasis Respite has a card that I am at 3 of on Rhinar, and where this deck can play Unmovable, so I don't think you need 3 of it. I have played Oasis Respite into so many matchups. I am so high on this card right now. Oasis Respite into any slower matchup is just free sustain. In Rhinar, you bring in Tunic into slower matchups, and Oasis Respite is just that extra 4D reacts that sometimes gain you a life. And this card just felt so amazing playing it in Rhinar. I thought it would be pretty good here. You bring this in versus, of course, Kano. That's why it was in Rhinar originally, even though I even have 3AB in that deck. But into matchups like the Mirror, into Dorinthia, matchups like that where they're trying to go tall and they need to hit for their effects, this card just hoses them, and it is definitely one of my most liked cards going into heavy hitters. So definitely play this Oasis Respite. It is a tool I think is very strong. And then the final card is one of Stamp Authority. This is just a card I really like. It does a few things, so we'll read it. First, it's a 3-cost aura with 3 block at blue, and it's grabbable off Imposing Visage, so a good reason to play it. When it enters the arena, if we have 2 or more cards in our pitch zone with cost 3 or greater, we gain +1 intellect. So with Imposing Visage, if we pitched a card of cost 3 to 2 cards of cost 3 to Imposing Visage, we get that +1 intellect. Also allowing us to set up an arsenal with our last card if this is on turn 1. While it's in the arena, attack action cards do not trigger their hit effects, which if we're playing this, it'll probably be ending our turn, so our hit effects won't really get stopped. And this will mainly be good into things like Azalea, who have really strong hit effects that can stop us if we're trying to set up a massive 6-card hand with something like this Stamp Authority. And then at the beginning of our action phase, we destroy it. Stamp Authority comes in versus decks that have really strong hit effects that we want to stop. In doing so, if we find it later, it's not as good because it's harder to play late. But if we find it really early, especially turn 1 off of something like an Imposing Visage, we just get to set up a free 6-card hand. And then if we have Beltings or E-Strikes or Rouse the Ancients, we could even dominate Arouse the Ancients at that point. Since Rouse does cost 3, Bravo can give it go again. Even though that's very uncommon, I think for those certain matchups that you do want to set up on, Stamp Authority's really, really good. You also bring this in against something like Wizard because it's a blue that we can pitch, but that's not the main reason for it. A really nice card. It's not a card that you see in a lot of Guardian decks because that 6-card hand, I will admit, is a little unreliable since you need to find Imposing Visage turn 1, but already Imposing Visage is a really good card to find early, and it wasn't really played late anyway, so this can just be another payoff to the Showtime as well, because honestly, sometimes you don't need the Showtime. If your hand, say, is Buckling Blow, Cranial Crush, Imposing Visage, and I said Crippling Crush before, so Buckling Blow, Cranial Crush, Crippling Crush, Imposing Visage. You have the 2 things to get the stamp, and then the card you already want to Arsenal, being the Crippling Crush or even like the Starstruck, the Choke Slam, something like that, a good red attack. You can find this 6-card hand, have the card you want in your arsenal, and hope to draw into some good go-again effects or something like a Pummel or a Tear Sunder to just absolutely destroy your opponent on the next turn, while stopping them from getting any hit effects that could disrupt you from doing so. But it's not a card you're going to play most of the time. Most of the time, you'll be bringing in things like Beltings, E-Strikes, and Pummels. That with all of this main board having that 68 is close to what I would play. Also, Remembrance is not in this deck, even though it is a more fatigued deck, because Remembrance does not block, and that is a big problem. And you're Bravo, so if it's a fatigue mirror, you can get in pretty easily because of your Dominate. You just can like find bigger attacks and then dominate over to try and chip through damage. So I think you're in a pretty good spot against fatigue anyway. But with all of that said, that's going to be it for the video. I hope you guys enjoyed, and I hope you have fun playing Bravo in prior to or well after the release of Heavy Hitters, because I think this hero is extremely good, but I think a lot of the heroes right now, it's a pretty compact might not be the right word, but it's a more diverse meta. It's a very diverse meta where a lot of different heroes are playable. So even though Bravo is good, he'll probably stay for a while since it's not because with so many heroes, it's not likely that Bravo will LL. So you'll have him for probably a pretty long time, and Bravo has shown to be one of the best consistently good heroes. I mean, this guy came out in the first set. He got a bunch of support, though. He got Tear Sunder, he got Starstruck, he got a bunch more blues. But he's shown that he can keep getting support, and he's still getting support, even in Heavy Hitters. So, Bravo is here to stay, and he's definitely a hero that I would recommend to a lot of people. But that's going to be the end of the video. I hope you all had a good day, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye.